There we go.
And I think live we be. No, wait.
Hey.
Now we're live.
Were we live?
Okay, like, what do you mean? Do you not consider me a co-host?
You're a guest.
Who's on just about every single stream?
I mean, you're in the channel description as a regular guest.
Hi, Lucas.
Hello, Lucas.
Hi.
Oh, yeah.
Can't even get his name out there.
Gemma, you don't know Lucas. Yes, this is my mans.
Ah! You mans. Hello.
Mans. Gemma's
Hello, Lucas.
back. Hooray!
Yes.
Yes. I am here.
I was going to, like, redo the speech that the two twins give in Avatar when they're announcing Zuko's back to the Fire Nation. But I didn't.
Ah. Oh well.
And I was gonna go with it literally at the end part and still say after 3 long years.
After 3 long, continuous years, Gemma hath returned.
She's finally restored her honor.
Well, I was going to say, your co-host has returned, and you're like in the show they yell Zuko dramatically. It's going to be like, your co-host has returned! Gemma.
Yeah, and I'm here.
Also, I'm a little offended you're not using Little Cthulhu as the background.
I didn't have time to do that.
Fair.
Hello, Vincent Raptor.
Hello, people. I'm back cooking again.
No, it is Gemma, not K. Not K as in Kaylin from the Discord.
She was on the pilot for Hot and Cold Beans.
Yes. K, the
Yeah. Do I sound American or something? No, what really, it's like the amount of people that have went like, oh my god, is that the English teacher that's in this episode of Bad Creepypasta?
What?
Like, no, we have completely different accents.
Gemma, is Glasgow filled with specky bams or not? Vince wants
I'm
to
not
know.
Glaswegian. My mum is.
Hashtag
I haven't done reading for a while, even like just in general.
Hashtag
Hang on,
Aberdeen for life.
I'm threatening our friends to get in here.
Good.
Cool.
Yes, everyone, that's how you treat your friends. That's how you get them to support you. You threaten them.
Yeah,
Always
well,
works for me.
I have an emergency pun folder on my phone in case you motherfuckers get depressed, so it balances out.
I like it.
Yes.
Have we managed to get you over to this, to the dark side?
No, this is just to cheer you guys up. I look at it and I'm just like, ugh, they'd like this.
Well, that's still very considerate of you. I can hear your anger. You English need to speak proper English like us Americans.
Alright, I'm back.
Just...
Did you even come back?
I'm only staying because of all the work I put into Little Cthulhu.
Okay, Raptor says, does Cthulhu have a beak underneath his head tentacles? Discuss. I'ma say no.
Depending, because I know that some squids have beaks, essentially like some sort of like bone, and it's terrifying.
Yes. I'm going to say no only because I think that makes him too familiar as an actual octopus and less,
Eldritch abomination.
yeah.
Really, what's actually under the head, like the head tentacles, is just a smiley face, and that's even more terrifying.
Just a big shit-eating grin.
If I'm not
He's
scared of
actually
our,
really excited to be here.
if I'm not scared for of our friendship, is it even real?
True. I haven't read this one in a while. I really like it. It sounded like I said I don't really like it. I do really like it.
I was like, wait, did you say you don't or you do?
Yeah, I do apologize if I start slurring. I was really, really awake up until about an hour ago, and I'm like going, God, I'm really, really sleepy. My brain just I was in the middle of a conversation and I just started staring into space. It was very amusing for the other people in the room.
Did you party too hard last night?
A little.
Nice.
I did get back on the last train home though, which was at 8 minutes past midnight.
Yes, Vince,
Jeez.
we know what you mean.
Yeah, Vin says, I would have volunteered to come onto the stream, but Lovecraft said he didn't care for people like me. You know
Yes,
what I
people
mean.
from New York.
Oh yeah.
Wait, Gemma's back, so we gotta say it properly. New York.
New York.
People who prefer eating their sandwiches whole rather than having it cut. He hates that. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Exactly, New York.
Do you still think you'll read Innsmouth and Color Out of Space on Cold Beans? Yeah, definitely.
Those two are really good.
They
One of
are
my favorites is called The Outsider. It's a really good one.
Mm-hmm.
It's very short as well.
I've threatened everyone, and yet they're not coming in. Should we get started, and maybe Cthulhu will summon everyone here?
Yeah, we might as well. Also, Cthulhu's tentacles are his mustache. York can sink into the sea for all I care. Damn. Alright, so, as you all know, we are going to be reading a true classic this evening. Lovecraft's Call of Cthulhu. Found among the papers of the late Francis Wayland Thurston of Boston. Of such great powers or beings they may be conceivably a survival of a hugely remote period when consciousness was manifested, perhaps, in shapes and forms long since withdrawn before the tide of advancing humanity. Forms of which poetry and legend alone have caught a flying memory and called them gods, monsters, mythical beings of all sorts and kinds. Algernon Blackwood. Chapter 1: The Horror in Clay. The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. The sciences, each straining in its own direction, have hitherto harmed us little, but some day the piecing together of dissociated knowledge will open up such terrifying vistas of reality and of our frightful position therein, that we shall either go mad from the revelation, or flee from the deadly light into the peace and safety of a new dark age. Theosophists have guessed at the awesome grandeur of the cosmic cycle wherein our world and human race form transient incidents. They have hinted at strange survivals in terms which would freeze the blood if not masked by a bland optimism. But it is not from them that there came the single glimpse of a forbidden eons, which chills me when I think of it and maddens me when I dream of it. That glimpse, like all dread glimpses of truth, flashed out from an accidental piecing together of separated things. In this case, an old newspaper item and the notes of a dead professor. I hope that no one else will accomplish this piecing out. Certainly, if I live, I shall never knowingly supply a link in so hideous a chain. I think that the professor, too, intended to keep silent regarding the part he knew, and that he would have destroyed his notes had not sudden death seized him. My knowledge of the thing began in the winter of 1926 to 1927, with the death of my granduncle, George Gamel Angel, professor emeritus of Semitic languages in Brown University, Providence, Rhode Island. Professor Angel was widely considered as an authority on ancient inscriptions, and had frequently been resorted to by the heads of prominent museums, so that his passing at the age of 92 may be recalled by many. Locally, interest was intensified by the obscurity of the cause of death. The professor had been stricken whilst returning from the Newport boat, falling suddenly, as witnesses said, after having been jostled by a nautical-looking Negro who had come from one of the queer dark courts on the precipitous hillside which formed a shortcut from the waterfront to the deceased's home in William Street. Physicians were unable to find any visible disorder, but concluded after perplexed debate that some obscure lesion of the heart, induced by the brisk ascent of so steep a hill by so elderly a man, was responsible for the end. At the time I saw no reason to dissent from this dictum, but latterly I am inclined to wonder, and more than wonder. Gemma, would you like to take the next three?
Cool. As my granduncle's heir and executor, for he died a childless widower, I was expected to go over his papers with some thoroughness, and for that purpose moved his entire set of files and boxes to my quarters in Boston. Much of the material which I correlated will be later published by the American Archaeological Society. There was one box which I found exceedingly puzzling, and which I felt much averse from shewing to other eyes. It had been locked, and I did not find the key till it occurred to me to examine the personal ring which the professor carried always in his pocket. Then indeed I succeeded in opening it, but when I did, so seemed only to be confronted by a greater and more closely locked barrier. For what could be the meaning of the queer day bas-relief and the disjointed jottings, ramblings, and cuttings which I found? Had my uncle, in his latter years, become credulous of the most superficial impostors? I resolved to search out the eccentric sculptor, responsible for this apparent disturbance of an old man's peace of mind. The bas-relief was a rough rectangle less than an inch thick and about 5 by 6 inches in area, obviously of modern origin. Its designs, however, were far from the modern in atmosphere and suggestion, for although the vagaries of cubism and futurism are many and wild, they do not often reproduce that cryptic regularity which lurks in the prehistoric writing, and writing of some kind the bulk of these designs seemed certainly to be, though my memory, despite much familiarity with the papers and collections of my uncle, failed in any way to identify this particular species, or even to hint at his remotest affiliations. Above these apparent hieroglyphics was a figure of evidently pictorial intent, though its impressionistic execution forbade a very clear idea of its nature. It seemed to be a sort of monster, or a symbol representing a monster, of a form which only a diseased fancy could conceive. If I say that my somewhat extravagant imagination yielded simultaneous pictures of an octopus, a dragon, and a human caricature, I shall not be unfaithful to the spirit of the thing. A pulpy, tentacled head, surmounted a grotesque and scaly body, with rudimentary wings, but it was the general outline of the whole which made it most shockingly frightful. Behind the figure was a vague suggestion of a cyclopean architectural background. The writing accompanying this oddity was aside from a stack of press cuttings in Professor Angel's most recent hand, and made no pretense to literary style. which seemed to be the main document, was headed Cthulhu Cult, in characters painstakingly printed to avoid the erroneous readings of words so unheard of. The manuscript was divided into two sections, the first of which was headed 1925, Dream and Dream Work of H. A. Wilcox, 7 Thomas Street, Providence, Rhode Island, and the second, Narrative of Inspector John R. Legrasse, 121 Bienville Street, New Orleans, Louisiana, at 1908 AAS MTG notes on same and Professor Webster's account. The other manuscript papers were all brief notes, some of them accounts of the queer dreams of different persons, some of them citations from theosophical books and magazines, notably W. Scott Eliot's Atlantis and the Lost Lemuria, and the rest comments on long-surviving secret societies and hidden cults, with references to passages and such comments on a long-surviving... I've just read that again. References to passages in such mythological and anthropological source books as Fraser's Golden Bough and Miss Murray's Witch Cult in Western Europe. The cuttings largely alluded to mental illnesses and outbreaks of group folly or mania in the spring of 1925.
Kenzie, would you like to take the next three?
Thank you. The first half of the principal manuscript told a very peculiar tale. It appears that on March 1st, 1925, a thin, dark young man of neurotic and excited aspect had called upon Professor Angel bearing a singular clay bas-relief, which was then exceedingly damp and fresh. His card bore the name of Henry Anthony Wilcox, and my uncle had recognized him as the youngest son of an excellent family slightly known to him, who had latterly been studying sculpture at the Rhode Island School of Design and living alone at the Fleur-de-Lis building near the institution. Wilcox was a precocious youth of known genius, but great eccentricity, and had been from childhood excited attention through the strange stories and odd dreams he was in the habit of relating. He called himself psychically hypersensitive, but the staid folk of the ancient commercial city dismissed him as merely queer. Never mingling much with his kind, he had dropped gradually from social visibility, and was now known only to a small group of aesthetes from other towns. Even the Providence Art Club, anxious to preserve its conservatism, had found him quite hopeless. On the occasion of the visit, ran the professor's manuscripts, the sculptor abruptly asked for the benefit of his host's archaeological knowledge in identifying the hieroglyphics of the bas-relief. He had spoke in a dreamy, stilted manner which suggested posed and alienated sympathy, and my uncle showed some sharpness in replying, for the conspicuous freshness of the tablet implied kinship with anything but archaeology. Young Wilcox's rejoinder, which impressed my uncle enough to make him recall and record it verbatim, was a fantastically poetic cast which must have typified his whole conversation, and which I have since found highly characteristic of him. He said, "It is new, indeed, for I made it last night in a dream of strange cities, and dreams are older than brooding Tyre, or the contemplative Sphinx, or garden-gurgled Babylon." It was then that he began that rambling tale which suddenly played upon a sleeping memory and won the fevered interest of my uncle. There had been a slight earthquake tremor the night before, the most considerable felt in New England for some years, and Wilcox's imagination had been keenly affected. Upon retiring, he had an unprecedented dream of great cyclopean cities, of Titan blocks and sky-flung monoliths, all dripping with green ooze and sinister with latent horror. Hieroglyphics had covered the walls and pillars, and from some undetermined point below had come a voice that was not a voice, a chaotic sensation which only fancy could transmute into sound, but which he attempted to render by an almost unpronounceable jumble of letters. Cthulhu Fatak. This verbal... Sorry?
Was that 3?
Yeah, it was 3. I thought we were doing 4.
This verbal jumble was the key to the recollection, which excited and disturbed Professor Angel. He questioned the sculptor with scientific minuteness, and studied with almost frantic intensity the bas-relief on which the youth had found himself working, chilled and clad only in his nightclothes, when waking had stolen bewilderingly over him. My uncle blamed his old age, Wilcox afterwards said, for his slowness in recognizing both hieroglyphics and pictorial design. Many of his questions seemed highly out of place to his visitor, especially those which tried to connect the latter with strange cults or societies. And Wilcox could not understand the repeated promises of silence, which he was offered in exchange for an admission of membership in some widespread mystical or paganly religious body. When Professor Angel became convinced that the sculptor was indeed ignorant of any cult or system of cryptic lore, he besieged his visitor with demands for future reports of dreams. This bore regular fruit, for after the first interview, the manuscript records daily calls of the young man, during which he related startling fragments of nocturnal imagery whose burden was always some terrible cyclopean vista of dark and dripping stone, with a subterranean voice or intelligence shouting monotonously in enigmatical sense impacts, uninscribable save as gibberish. The 2 sounds most frequently repeated are those repeated by the letters Cthulhu and Rilliah. On March 23rd, the manuscript continued. Wilcox failed to appear, and inquiries at his quarters revealed that he had been stricken with an obscure sort of fever and taken to the home of his family in Waterman Street. He had cried out in the night, arousing several other artists in the building, and had manifested since then only alternations of unconsciousness and delirium. My uncle at once telephoned the family, and from that time forward kept close watch of the case, calling often at the Thayer Street office of Dr. Toby, whom he learned to be in charge. The youth's febrile mind, apparently, was dwelling on strange things, and the doctor shuddered now and then as he spoke of them. They included not only a repetition of what he had formerly dreamed, but touched wildly on a gigantic thing, miles high, which walked or lumbered about. He at no time fully described this object, but occasional frantic words, as repeated by Dr. Toby, convinced the professor that it must be identical to the nameless monstrosity he had sought to depict in his dream sculpture. Reference to this object, the doctor added, was invariably a prelude to the young man's subsidence into lethargy. His temperature, oddly enough, was not greatly above normal, but his whole condition was otherwise such as to suggest true fever rather than mental disorder. On April 2nd, at about 3 p.m., every trace of Wilcox's malady suddenly ceased. He sat upright in bed, astonished to find himself at home and completely ignorant of what had happened in dream or reality since the night of March 22nd. Pronounced well by his physician, he returned to his quarters in 3 days, but to Professor Angel he was of no further assistance. All traces of strange dreaming had vanished with his recovery, and my uncle kept no record of his night thoughts after a week of pointless and irrelevant accounts of thoroughly usual visions.
Here the first part of the manuscript ended, but references to certain of the scattered notes gave me much material for thought. So much, in fact, that the only ingrained skepticism that formed my philosophy can account for my continued distrust of the artist. The notes in question were those descriptive of the dreams of various persons covering the same period as that in which young Wilcox had his strange visitations. My uncle, it seems, had quickly instituted a prodigiously far-flung body of inquiries, amongst nearing all of his friends whom he could question without impertinence, asking for nightly reports of their dreams and the dates of any notable visions for some time past. The reception of his request seemed to have been varied, but he must, at the very least, have received more responses than any ordinary man could have handled without a secretary. This original correspondence was not preserved, but his notes formed a thorough and really significant digest. Average people in society and business, New England's traditional salt of the earth, gave an almost completely negative result. Those scattered cases of uneasy but formless nocturnal impressions appeared here and there, always between March 23rd and April 2nd, the period of young Wilcox's delirium. Scientific men were a little more affected, though 4 cases of vague description suggest fugitive glimpses of strange landscapes, and in one case there is mention of dread, something abnormal. It was from the artists and poets that the pertinent answers came, and I know that panic would have broken loose had they been able to compare notes. As it was, lacking their original letters, I have suspected the complier of having asked leading questions, or of having edited the correspondence in corroboration of what he had latently resolved to see. That is why I continue to feel that Wilcox, somehow cognizant of the old data which my uncle had possessed, been imposing on the veteran scientist. These responses from aesthetes told a disturbing tale. From February the 28th to April the 2nd, a large proportion of them had dreamed very bizarre things, the intensity of the dreams being immeasurably the stronger during the period of the sculptor's delirium. Over a fourth of those who reported anything reported scenes and half-sounds not unlike those which Wilcox had described, and some of the dreamers confessed acute fear, the gigantic nameless thing visible toward the last. One case, which the note describes with emphasis, was very sad. The subject, a widely known architect with leanings towards theosophy and occultism, went violently insane on the date of young Wilcox's seizure, and expired several months later after incessant screamings to be saved from some escaping denizen of hell. Had my uncle referred to these cases by name instead of merely by number, I should have attempted some corroboration and personal investigation, but as it was, I succeeded in tracing down only a few. All of these, however, bore out the notes in full, and I have often wondered if the objects of the professor's questioning felt as puzzled as did this fraction. It is well that no explanation shall ever reach them. The press cuttings, as I have intimated, touched on a case of panic, mania, and eccentricity during the given period. Professor Angell must have employed a cutting bureau, but the number of extracts was tremendous, and the sources scattered throughout the globe. Here was a nocturnal suicide in London, where a lone sleeper had leaped from a window after a shocking cry. Here, likewise, a rambling letter to the editor of a paper in South America, where a fanatic deduces a dire future from visions he had seen. A dispatch from California describes a Theosophist colony as donning white robes en masse for some glorious fulfillment which never arrives, whilst items from India speak guardedly of serious native unrest towards the end of March. Voodoo orgies multiplied in Haiti, and African outposts report ominous mutterings. American officers in the Philippines find certain tribes bothersome about this time, and New York policemen are mobbed by hysterical Levantines on the night of March the 22nd to the 23rd. The west of Ireland, too, is full of wild rumour and legendary, and a fantastic painter named Ardois Bonneau hangs a blasphemous dream landscape in the Paris Spring Salon of 1926. And so numerous are the recorded troubles in insane asylums, the only a miracle can have stopped in the medical fraternity from noting strange parallelisms and drawing mystified conclusions. A weird bunch of cuttings, all told, and I can at this date scarcely envisage the callous rationalism with which I set them aside. But I was then convinced that young Wilcox had known of the older matters mentioned by the professor.
Chapter 2. How are we pronouncing this name?
Lovecraft.
Alright, just wanted to make sure so I don't sound like an absolute tit reading it. Chapter 2. The Tale of Inspector Legrasse. The older matters which had made the sculptor's dream in bas-relief so significant to my uncle formed the subject of the second half of his long manuscript. Once before, it appears, Professor Angell had seen the hellish outlines of the nameless monstrosity, puzzled over the unknown hieroglyphics, and heard the ominous syllables which can be rendered as Cthulhu. And all this is so stirring and horrible a connection that it is small wonder he pursued young Wilcox with queries and demands for data. The earlier experience had come in 1908, 17 years before, when the American Archaeological Society held its annual meeting in St. Louis. Professor Angell, as befitted one of his authority and attainments, had had a prominent part in the deliberations, and was one of the first to be approached by the several outsiders who took advantage of the convocation to offer questions to correct answering and problems of expert solution. The chief of these outsiders, and in a short time the focus of interest for the entire meeting, was a commonplace-looking middle-aged man who had traveled all the way from New Orleans to certain special information unobtainable from any local source. His name was John Raymond Legras, and he was by profession an inspector of police. With him he bore the subject of his visit, a grotesque, repulsive, and apparently very ancient stone statuette whose origin he was at a loss to determine. It must not be fancied that Inspector Legras had the least interest in archaeology. On the contrary, his wish for enlightenment was prompted by purely professional considerations. The statuette, idol, fetish, or whatever it was, had been captured some months before in the wooded swamps south of New Orleans during a raid on a supposed voodoo meeting. And so singular and hideous were the rites connected with it, that the police could not but realize that they had stumbled upon a dark cult totally unknown to them, and infinitely more diabolic than even the blackest of the African voodoo circles. Of its origin, apart from the erratic and unbelievable tales extorted from the captured members, absolutely nothing was to be discovered. Hence, the anxiety of the police for any antiquarian lore which might help them to place the frightful symbol, and through it track down the cult to its fountainhead.
Inspector Legras was scarcely prepared for the sensation which his offering created. One sight of the thing had been enough to throw the assembled men of science into a state of tense excitement, and they lost no time in crowding around him to gaze at the diminutive figure whose utter strangeness and air of genuinely abysmal antiquity hinted so potently at unopened and archaic vistas. No recognized school of sculpture had animated this terrible object, yet centuries and even thousands of years seemed recorded in its dim and greenish surface of unplaceable stone. The figure, which was finally passed slowly from man to man for close and careful study, was between 7 and 8 inches in height, and of exquisitely artistic workmanship. It represented a monster of vaguely anthropoid outline, but with an octopus-like head whose face was a mass of feelers, a scaly, rubbery-looking body, prodigious claws on hind and fore feet, and long, narrow wings behind. This thing, which seemed instinct with a fearsome and unnatural malignancy, was of a somewhat bloated corpulence, and squatted evilly on a rectangular block or pedestal covered with undecipherable characters. The tips of the wings touched the back edge of the block. The seat occupied the center, whilst the long, curved claws of the doubled-up, crouching hind legs gripped the front edge and extended a quarter of the way down toward the bottom of the pedestal. The cephalopod head was bent forward, so that the ends of the facial feelers brushed the backs of huge forepaws, which clasped the croucher's elevated knees. The aspect of the whole was abnormally lifelike, and the more subtly fearful because its source was so totally unknown. Its vast, awesome, and incalculable age was unmistakable. Yet not one link did it shew with any known type of art belonging to civilization's youth, or indeed to any other time. Totally separate and apart, its very material was a mystery, for the soapy, greenish-black stone with its golden or iridescent flecks and striations resembled nothing familiar to geology or mineralogy. The characters along the base were equally baffling, and no member present, despite a representation of half the world's expert learning in this field, could form the least notion of even their foremost linguistic kinship. They, like the subject and material, belong to something horribly remote and distinct from mankind as we know it, something frightfully suggestive of old and unhallowed cycles of life, in which our world and our conceptions have no part. And yet, as the members severally shook their heads and confessed defeat at the inspector's problem, there was one man in that gathering who suspected a touch of bizarre familiarity in the monstrous shape and writing, and who presently told with some diffidence of the odd trifle he knew, This person was the late William Channing Webb, professor of anthropology in Princeton University, and an explorer of no slight note. Professor Webb had been engaged, 48 years before, in a tour of Greenland and Iceland in search of some runic inscriptions which he failed to unearth. And whilst high up on the West Greenland coast, he encountered a singular tribe or cult of degenerate Eskimo whose religion, a curious form of devil worship, chilled him with its deliberate bloodthirstiness and repulsiveness. It was a faith of which other Esquimaux knew little, and which they mentioned only with shudders, saying that it had come down from horribly ancient aeons before ever the world was made. Besides nameless rites and human sacrifices, there were certain queer hereditary rituals addressed to a supreme elder devil, or Tornasok. And of this Professor Webb had taken a careful phonetic copy of an aged Angakok, or wizard priest, expressing sounds in Roman letters as best he knew how. But just now of prime significance was the fetish which this cult had cherished, and around which they danced when the aurora leaped high over the ice cliffs. It was, the professor stated, a very crude bas-relief of stone, comprising a hideous picture of some cryptic writing. And so far as he could tell, it was a rough parallel in all essential features of the bestial thing now lying before the meeting.
This data, received with suspense and astonishment by the assembled members, proved doubly exciting to Inspector Legrasse, and he began to want to ply his informant with questions. Having noted and copied an oral ritual among the swamp cult worshippers his men had arrested, he besought the professor to remember as best he might the syllables taken down amongst the diabolist Eskimo. Then he followed an exhaustive comparison of details, and a moment of really odd silence, which both detective and scientist agreed on the virtual identity of the phrase common to two hellish rituals so many worlds of distance apart. What in substance both the Eskimo wizards and the Louisiana swamp priests had chanted to their kindred idols was something very like this, the word divisions being guessed at from the traditional breaks in the phrase as chanted aloud. Bingui, Wiganafi, Cthulhu Relay, Wiganaki, Fichan, Lifitang. Legrasse had one point in advance of Professor Webb, for several among his Mongol prisoners had repeated to him what older celebrants had told them the words meant. This text, as given, ran something like this: "In his house at Relay, dead Cthulhu waits, dreaming." And now, in response to a general and urgent demand, Inspector Legrasse related as fully as possible his experience with the swamp worshippers, telling a story to which I could see my uncle attach profound significance. It savoured of the wildest dreams of mythmaker and theosophist, and disclosed an astonishing degree of cosmic imagination among such pariahs as may have been, might at least expected to possess it.
On November 1st, 1907, there had come to the New Orleans police a frantic summon from the swamp and lagoon country to the south. The squatters there, mostly primitive but good-natured descendants of Lafitte's men, were in the grip of the stark terror from an unknown thing which had stolen upon them in the night. It was voodoo, apparently, but voodoo of a more terrible sort than they had ever known. And some of their women and children had disappeared since the malevolent tom-tom had begun its insistent beating far from within the black haunted woods, where no dweller ventured. There were insane shouts and harrowing screams, soul-chilling chants and dancing devil flames. And, the frightened messenger added, the people could stand it no more. So a body of 20 police, filling 2 carriages and an automobile, had set out on the late afternoon with the shivering squatter as a guide. At the end of the passable road they alighted, and for miles splashed on in silence through the terrible cypress of woods where they never came. Ugly roots and malignant hanging nooses of Spanish moss beset them, and now and then a pile of dank stones or fragment of rotting wall intensified by its hint of morbid habitation, a depression which every malformed tree and every fungus islet combined to create. At length, the squatter settlement, a miserable huddle of huts, hove in sight, and hysterical dwellers ran out to cluster round the group of bobbing lanterns. The muffled beat of tom-toms was now fairly audible far, far ahead, and a curdling shriek came at infrequent intervals when the wind shifted. A reddish glare, too, seemed to filter through the pale undergrowth beyond endless avenues of forest night. Reluctant even to be left alone again, each one of the cowed squatters refused to point blank to advance another inch toward the scene of unholy worship, so Inspector Legrasse and his 19 colleagues plunged on unguided into black arcades of horror that none of them had ever trod before. The region now entered by the police was one of traditionally evil repute, substantially unknown and untraversed by white men. There were legends of a hidden lake unglimpsed by mortal sight, in which dwelt a huge, formless white polypous thing with luminous eyes, and squatters whispered that bat-winged devils flew out of caverns and inner earth to worship it at midnight. They said it had been there before D'Iberville, before La Salle, before the Indians, and before even the wholesome beasts and birds of the woods. It was a nightmare itself, and to see it was to die. But it made men dream, and so they know enough to keep away. The present voodoo orgy was, indeed, on the merest fringe of this abhorred area, but the location was bad enough. Hence perhaps the very place of the worship had terrified the squatters more than the shocking sounds and incidents.
Only poetry or madness could do justice to the noises heard at Legrasse's men as they plowed through the black morass toward the red glare and the muffled tom-toms. There are vocal qualities peculiar to men, and vocal qualities peculiar to beasts, and it is terrible to hear the one when the source should yield the other. Animal fury and orgiastic license whipped themselves to demonic heights by howls and squawking ecstasies that tore and reverberated themselves through those nighted woods, like pestilential tempests from the gulfs of hell. Now and then the less organized ululation would cease, and from what seemed a well-drilled chorus of hoarse voices would rise in sing-song chant that hideous phrase or ritual. Finglui Miglonath Cthulhu Vilya Waganago Fatagen. Then the men, having reached a spot where the trees were thinner, came suddenly in sight of the spectacle itself. 4 of them reeled, 1 fainted, and 2 were shaken into a frantic cry which the mad cacophony of the orgy fortunately deadened. Legrasse dashed swamp water on the face of the fainting man, and all stood trembling and nearly hypnotized with terror. In a natural glade of the swamp stood a grassy island of perhaps an acre's extent, clear of trees and tolerably dry. On this now leaped and twisted a more indescribable horde of human abnormality than any but a Sime or an Angarola could paint. Void of clothing, this hybrid spawn were braying, bellowing, and writhing about a monstrous ring-shaped bonfire, in the center of which, revealed by occasional rifts in the curtain of flame, stood a great granite monolith, some 8 feet in height, on top of which, incongruous with its diminutiveness, rested the noxious carven statuette. From a wide circle of 10 scaffolds set up at regular intervals, with the flame-girt monolith as a center hung, head downward, the oddly marred bodies of the helpless squatters who had disappeared. It was inside the circle that the ring of worshippers jumped and roared, the general direction of the mass motion being from left to right, an endless bacchanal between the ring of bodies and the ring of fire.
It may have been only imagination, and it may have been only echoes which induced one of the men, an excitable Spaniard, to fancy he heard antiphonal responses to the ritual from some far and illuminated spot deeper within the wood of ancient legendary and horror. This man, Joseph D. Galvez, I later met and questioned, and he proved distractingly imaginative. He indeed went so far as to hint of the faint beating of great wings, and of a glimpse of shining eyes and a mountainous white bulk beyond the remotest trees. But I suppose he had been hearing too much native superstition. Actually, the horrified pause of the men was of comparatively brief duration. Duty came first, and although there must have been nearly 100 mongrel celebrants in the throng, the police rallied on their firearms and plunged determinedly into the nauseous rite. For 5 minutes the resultant din and chaos were beyond description. Wild blows were struck, shots were fired, and escapes were made. But in the end Legrasse was able to count some 47 sullen prisoners, whom he forced to dress in haste and fall into line between 2 rows of policemen. 5 of the worshippers lay dead, and 2 severely wounded ones were carried away on improvised stretchers by their fellow prisoners. The image on the monolith, of course, was carefully removed and carried back by Legrasse. Examined at headquarters after a trip of intense strain and weariness, the prisoners all proved to be men of a very low, mixed-blooded and mentally aberrant type. Most were seamen, and a sprinkling of Negroes and mulattoes, large West Indians or Brava Portuguese from the Cape Verde Islands, give a colouring of voodooism to the heterogeneous cult. Before many questions were asked, it became manifest that something far deeper and older than Negro fetishism was involved. Degraded and ignorant as they were, the creatures held with surprising consistency to the central idea of their loathsome faith.
They worshipped, so they said, the great old ones who lived ages before there were any men, and who came to the young world out of the sky. Those old ones were gone now, inside the earth and under the sea, but their dead bodies had told their secrets and dreams to the first men, who formed a cult which had never died. This was that cult, and the prisoners said it had always existed and always would exist, hidden in distant wastes and dark places all over the world until the time when the great priest Cthulhu, from his dark house in the mighty city of Relay, under the waves, should rise and bring the earth again beneath his sway. Some day he would call, when the stars were ready, and the secret cult would always be waiting to liberate him. Meanwhile, no more must be told. There was a secret which even torture could not extract. Mankind was absolutely not alone among the conscious things of earth, for shapes came out of the dark to visit the faithful few. But these were not the great old ones. No man has ever seen the old ones. The carven idol was great Cthulhu, but none might say whether or not the others were precisely like him. No one could read the old writing now, but things were told by word of mouth. The chanted ritual was not the secret. That was never spoken aloud, only whispered. The chant meant only this. In his house at Riley, the dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. Only 2 of the prisoners were found sane enough to be hanged, and the rest were committed to various institutions. All denied a part in the ritual murders, and averred the killing that had been done by black-winged ones which had all come from them from their immemorial meeting place in the haunted wood. That those mysterious allies no coherent account could ever be gained. What the police did extract came mainly from an immensely aged mestizo named Castro, who claimed to have sailed to strange ports and talked with undying leaders of the cult in the mountains of China.
Old Castro remembered bits of hideous legend that paled the speculations of Theosophists and made man and the world seem recent and transient indeed. There had been eons when other things ruled on the earth, and they had great cities. Remains of them, he said the deathless Chinamen had told him, were still to be found as cyclopean stones on islands in the Pacific. They all died vast epochs of time before men came, but there were arts which could revive them when the stars had come round again to the right positions in the cycle of eternity. They had, indeed, come themselves from the stars, and brought their images with them. These great old ones, Castro continued, were not comprised altogether of flesh and blood. They had shape, for did not this star-fashioned image prove it? But that shape was not made of matter. When the stars were right, they could plunge from world to world through the sky, but when the stars were wrong, they could not live. But although they no longer lived, they would never really die. They all lay in stone houses in their great city of Rilia, preserved by the spells of mighty Cthulhu for a glorious resurrection, when the stars and the earth might once more be ready for them. But at the time some force from outside must serve to liberate their bodies. The spells that preserved them intact likewise prevented them from making an initial move, and they could only lie awake in the dark and think whilst uncounted millions of years rolled by. They knew all that was occurring in the universe, but their mode of speech was transmitted thought. Even now they talked in their tombs. When, after infinities of chaos, the first men came, the great old ones spoke to the sensitive among them by molding their dreams, for only thus could their language reach the fleshy minds of mammals. Then, whispered Castro, those first men formed the cult around the small idols which the great ones shewed them. Idols brought in dim areas from dark stars, from dim eras from dark stars. That cult would never die till the stars came right again, and the secret priest would take great Cthulhu from his tomb to revive his subjects and resume his rule of Earth. The time would be easy to know, for then mankind would have become as the great old ones, free and wild and beyond good and evil, with laws and morals thrown aside, and all men shouting and killing and reveling in joy. Then the liberated old ones would teach them new ways to shout and kill and revel and enjoy themselves, and all the earth would flame with a holocaust of ecstasy and freedom. Meanwhile the cult, by appropriate rites, must keep alive the memory of those ancient ways and shadow forth the prophecy of their return.
In the elder time, chosen men had talked with the entombed old ones in dreams, but then something had happened. The great stone city of Rillier, with its monoliths and sepulchres, had sunk beneath the waves and the deep waters, full of the one primal mystery through which not even a thought can pass, had cut off the spectral intercourse. But memory never died, and a high priest said that the city would rise again when the stars were right. Then came out of the earth the black spirits of earth, mouldy and shadowy, and full of dim rumours picked up in caverns beneath forgotten sea bottoms. But of them old Castro dared not speak much. He cut himself off hurriedly, and no amount of persuasion or subtlety could elicit more in his direction. The size of the old ones, too, he curiously declined to mention. Of the cult, he said, that he thought the centre lay amid the pathless deserts of Arabia, where Irem, the city of pillars, dreams hidden and untouched. It was not allied to the European witch cult, and was virtually unknown beyond its members. No book had ever really hinted of it, though the deathless Chinaman said that there was double meanings in the Necronomicon of the mad Arab Abdul al-Zred, which the initiated might read as they close, especially the much-discussed couplet, "That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange aeons even death may die." Legras, deeply impressed and not a little bewildered, had inquired in vain concerning the historic affiliations of the cult. Castro, apparently, had told the truth when he said that it was wholly a secret. The authorities at Tulane University could shed no light upon either cult nor image, and now the detective had come to the highest authorities in the country and met with no more than a Greenland tale of Professor Webb. The feverish interest aroused at the meeting by Legras's tale, corroborated as it was by the statuette, is echoed in the subsequent correspondence of those who attended, although scant mention occurs in the formal publications of the Society. Caution is the first care of those accustomed to face occasional charlatanry and imposture. Legras for some time lent the image to Professor Webb, but at the latter's death it was returned to him and remains in his possession, where I viewed it not long ago. Truly is a terrible thing, and unmistakably akin to the dream sculpture of young Wilcox.
That my uncle was excited by the tale of the sculptor I did not wonder, for what thoughts must arise upon hearing, after a knowledge of what Legras had learned of the cult, of a sensitive young man who had dreamed not only the figure and exact hieroglyphics of the swamp-found image and the Greenland devil tablet, but had come in his dreams upon at least 3 of the precise words of the formula uttered alike by Esquimaux and Diabolists and mongrel Louisianans. Professor Engel's instant start on an investigation of the utmost thoroughness was eminently natural. Though privately I suspected young Wilcox of having heard of the cult in some indirect way, and of having invented a series of dreams to heighten and continue the mystery at my uncle's expense. The dream narratives and cuttings collected by the professor were, of course, strong corroboration, but the rationalism of my mind and the extravagance of the whole subject led me to adopt what I thought the most sensible conclusions. So, after thoroughly studying the manuscript again and correlating the theosophical and anthropological notes with the cult narratives of Glass, I made a trip to Providence to see the sculptor and give him the rebuke I thought proper for so boldly imposing upon a learned and aged man. Wilcox still lived alone by the Fleur de Lis building in Thomas Street, a hideous Victorian imitation of 17th century Breton architecture, which flaunts its stuccoed front amidst the lovely colonial houses and the ancient hill, and under the very shadow of the finest Georgian steeple in America. I found him at work in his rooms, and at once conceded from the specimens scattered about that his genius is indeed profound and authentic. He will, I believe, sometime be heard from as one of the great descendants, for he has crystallized in clay and will one day mirror in marble those nightmares and fantasies which Arthur Machen evokes in prose, and Clark Ashton Smith makes visible in verse and painting. Dark, frail, and somewhat unkempt in aspect, he turned languidly at my knock and asked me my business without rising. When I told him who I was, he displayed some interest, for my uncle had excited his curiosity in probing his strange dreams, and had never explained the reason for the study. I did not enlarge his knowledge in this regard, but sought with some subtlety to draw him out. In a short time I became convinced of his absolute sincerity, for he spoke of the dreams in a manner none could mistake. They and their subconscious residuum had influenced his art profoundly, and he showed me a morbid statue whose contours almost made me shake at the potency of its black suggestion. He could not recall having seen the original of this thing except in his own dream bas-relief, but the outlines had formed themselves insensibly under his hands. It was, no doubt, the giant shape he had raved of in delirium. That he really knew nothing of the hidden cult save from what my uncle's relentless catechism had let it fall, and he soon made clear, and again I strove to think of some way in which he could possibly have received the weird impressions.
He talked of his dreams in a strangely poetic fashion, making me see with terrible vividness the damp cyclopean city of slimy green stone, whose geometry, he oddly said, was all wrong. And hear with frightened expectancy the ceaseless, half-mental calling from underground, Cthulhu Fatagan, Cthulhu Fatagan. These words had formed part of the dread ritual which told of dead Cthulhu's dream vigil in his stone vault at Rillieux, and I felt deeply moved despite my rational beliefs. Wilcox, I was sure, had heard of the cult in some casual way, and had soon forgotten it amidst the mass of his equally weird reading and imagining. Later, by virtue of its sheer impressiveness, it had found subconscious expression in dreams, in the bas-relief, and in the terrible statue I now beheld, so that his imposture upon my uncle had been a very innocent one. The youth was of a type, at once slightly affected and slightly ill-mannered, which I could never like, but I was willing enough to admit both his genius and his honesty. I took leave of him amicably, and wished him all the success his talent promises. The matter of the cult still remained to fascinate me, and at times I had visions of personal fame from researches into its origin and connections. I visited New Orleans, talked with Grasse and others of that old-time raiding party, saw the frightening image, and even questioned some of the mongrel prisoners as still survived. Old Castro, unfortunately, had been dead for some years. What I now heard so graphically at first hand, though it was really no more than a detailed confirmation of what my uncle had written, excited me afresh. For I felt sure I was on the track of a very real, very secret, and very ancient religion whose discovery would make me an anthropologist of note. My attitude was still one of absolute materialism, as I wish it still were, and I discounted with almost inexplicable perversity the coincidence of the dream notes and odd cuttings collected by Professor Angel. One thing I began to suspect, and which I now fear I know, is that my uncle's death was far from natural. He fell on a narrow hill street leading up from an ancient waterfront swarming with foreign mongrels after a careless push from a Negro sailor. I did not forget the mixed blood and marine pursuits of the cult members in Louisiana. It would not be surprised to learn secret methods in poison needles as ruthless and as anciently known as the cryptic rites and beliefs. Legrasse and his men, it is true, have been let alone, but in Norway a certain seaman who saw things is dead. Might not the deeper inquiries of my uncle after encountering the sculptor's data have come to sinister ears? I think Professor Angel died because he knew too much, or because he was likely to learn too much. Whether I shall go as he did remains to be seen, for I have learned much now.
The madness from the sea. If heaven ever wishes to grant me a boon, it'll be a total effacing of the results of a mere chance which fixed my eye on a certain stray piece of shelf paper. It was nothing on which I would naturally have stumbled in the course of my daily round, for it was an old number of an Australian journal, Sydney Bulletin, from April 18th, 1925. It had escaped even the cutting bureau, which had at the time of its issuance been avidly collecting material for my uncle's research. I had largely given over my inquiries into what Professor Angel called the Cthulhu cult, and was visiting a learned friend in Paterson, New Jersey, the curator of a local museum and a mineralogist of note, examining one day the reserve specimens roughly set on the storage shelves in the rear room of the museum. My eye was caught by an odd picture in one of the old papers spread beneath the stones. It was the Sydney Bulletin I have mentioned, for my friend has wide affiliations in all conceivable foreign parts, and the picture was a half-tone cut of a hideous stone image, almost identical with that which Legrasse had found in the swamp. Eagerly clearing the sheet of its precious contents, I scanned the item in detail. I was disappointed to find of it only moderate length. What it suggested, however, was of a portentous significance to my flagging quest, and I carefully tore it out for immediate action. It reads as follows. Mystery derelict found at sea. Vigilant arrives with helpless, armed New Zealand yacht in tow. One survivor and dead man found aboard. Tale of desperate battle and deaths at sea. Rescued seaman refuses particulars of strange experience. Odd idol found in his possession. Inquiry to follow.
The Morrison Company's freighter Vigilant, bound from Valparaiso, arrived this morning at its wharf in Darling Harbor, having in tow the battled and disabled but heavily armed steam yacht Alert in Dunedin, New Zealand, which was sighted April 12th in south latitude 34 degrees 21 west, longitude 152 degrees 17, with one living and one dead man aboard. The Vigilant left Valparaiso March 25th, and on April 2nd was driven considerably south of her course by exceptionally heavy storms and monster waves. On April 12th, the derelict was sighted. and though apparently deserted, was found upon boarding to contain one survivor in a half-delirious condition, and one man who had evidently been dead for more than a week. The living man was clutching a horrible stone idol of unknown origin, about a foot in height, regarding whose nature authorities at Sydney University, the Royal Society, and the museum in College Street all profess complete bafflement, and which the survivor says he found in the cabin of the yacht in a small carved shrine of common pattern. The man, after recovering his senses, told an exceedingly strange story of piracy and slaughter. His name is Gustav Johansen, a Norwegian of some intelligence, had been second mate of the two-masted schooner Emma of Auckland, which sailed for Cayo, February 20th, with a complement of 11 men. The Emma, he says, was delayed and thrown wildly south of her course by the great storm of March 1st, and on March 22nd, in south latitude 49 degrees 51, I can't read,
West longitude 128 degrees 34.
sorry.
No problem. Do you want me to take over?
No, I'm good. My eyes are just, really dry right now.
Alrighty.
I'm having a hard... Encountered the Alert, manned by a queer and evil-looking crew of Kanakaks and half-castes. Being ordered peremptorily to turn back, Captain Collins refused, whereupon the strange crew began to fire savagely and without warning upon the schooner with a peculiarly heavy battery of brass cannon forming part of the yacht's equipment. The Emma's men showed fight, says the survivor, and though the schooner began to sink from shots beneath the waterline, they managed to heave alongside their enemy and board her, grappling with the savage crew on the yacht's deck and being forced to kill them all, the number being slightly superior, because of their particularly abhorrent and desperate, though rather clumsy mode of fighting.
3 of the Emma's men, including Captain Collins and First Mate Green, were killed, and the remaining 8 under Second Mate Johansen proceeded to navigate the captured yacht, going ahead in their original direction to see if any reason for their ordering back had existed. The next day, it appears, they raised and landed on a small island, although none is known to exist in that part of the ocean, and 6 of the men somehow died ashore, though Johansen is queerly reticent about this part of his story, and speaks only of their falling into a rock chasm. Later, it seems, he and one companion boarded the yacht and tried to manage her, but were beaten about by the storm of April 2nd. From that time till his rescue on the 12th, the man remembers little, and he does not even recall when William Bryden, his companion, died. Bryden's death reveals no apparent cause, and was probably due to excitement or exposure. Cable advices from Dunedin report that the Alert was well known there as an island trader and bore an evil reputation along the waterfront. It was owned by a curious group of half-castes, whose frequent meetings and night trips to the woods attracted no little curiosity. It had set sail in great haste just after the storm and earth tremors of March 1st. Our Auckland correspondent gives the Emma and her crew an excellent reputation, and Johansen is described as a sober and worthy man. The Admiralty will institute an inquiry on the whole matter beginning tomorrow, at which every effort will be made to induce Johansen to speak more freely than he has done hitherto. This was all, together with the picture of the hellish image. But what a train of ideas it started in my mind. Here were new treasuries of data on the Cthulhu cult, and evidence that it had strange interests at sea as well as on land. What motive prompted the hybrid crew to order back the Emma as they sailed about with their hideous idol? What was the unknown island on which 6 of the Emma's crew had died, and about which the mate Johansen was so secretive? What had the Vice Admiralty's investigation brought out, and what was known of the noxious cult in Dunedin. And most marvelous of all, what deep and more than natural linkage of dates was this which gave a malign and now undeniable significance to the various turns of events so carefully noted by my uncle. March 1st, or February 28th, according to the international dateline, the earthquake and storm had come. From Dunedin, the Alert and her noisome crew had darted eagerly forth as if imperiously summoned, and on the other side of the earth poets and artists had begun to dream of a strange, dark cyclopean city, whilst a young sculptor had moulded in his sleep the form of the dreaded Cthulhu. March 23rd, the crew of the Emma landed on an unknown island, and 6 men dead. And on that date, the dreams of sensitive men assumed a heightened vividness and darkened with a dread of a giant monster's malign pursuit, whilst an architect had gone mad, and a sculptor had lapsed suddenly into delirium. And what of this storm of April 2nd, the date on which all dreams of the dank city ceased, and Wilcox emerged unharmed from the bondage of strange fever? What of all this, and of those hints of old Castro about the sunken, star-born old ones and their coming reign, their faithful cult and their mastery of dreams? Was I tottering on the brink of cosmic horrors beyond man's power to bear? If so, they must be horrors of the mind alone, for in some way the 2nd of April had put a stop to whatever monstrous menace had begun its siege on mankind's soul.
That evening, after a day of hurried cabling and arranging, I bade my host adieu and took a train for San Francisco. In less than a month, I was in Dunedin, where, however, I found that little was known of the strange cult members who had lingered in the old sea taverns. Waterfront scum was far too common for special mention. There was vague talk about one inland trip these mongrels had made, during which faint drumming and red flame were noted on the distant hills. In Auckland, I learned that Johansen had returned with yellow hair turned white after a perfunctory and inconclusive questioning at Sydney. Thereafter sold his cottage in West Street and sailed with his wife to his old home in Oslo. Of his stirring experience, he would tell his friends no more than he had told the Admiralty officials, and all they could do was to give me his Oslo address. After that, I went to Sydney and talked profitously with seamen and members of the Vice Admiralty Court. I saw the Alert, now sold and in commercial use, a circular quay in Sydney Cove, but gained nothing from its non-committal bulk. The crouching image with its cuttlefish head, dragon body, scaly wings, and hieroglyphed pedestal was preserved in the museum at Hyde Park, and I studied it long and well, finding it a thing of balefully exquisite workmanship, and with the same utter mystery, terrible antiquity, and unearthly strangeness of material which I had noted in Legras's smaller specimen. Geologists, the curator told me, had found it a monstrous puzzle, for they vowed that the world held no rock like it. Then I thought with a shudder of what old Castro had told Legras about the primal great ones. They had come from the stars, and had brought their images with them. Shaken with such a mental revolution as I had never before known, I now resolved to visit mate Johansen in Oslo. Sailing for London, I re-embarked at once for the Norwegian capital, and one autumn day landed at the trim wharves in the shadow of the Egbert Johansen address. I discovered lay in the old town of King Harald Haralda, which kept alive the name of Oslo during all the centuries that the greater city masqueraded as Christiana. I made the brief trip by taxicab, and knocked with palpitant heart at the door of a neat and ancient building with plastered front. Sad-faced women in black answered my summons, and I was stung with disappointment when she told me in halting English that Gustav Johansen was no more.
He had not survived his return, said his wife, for the doings at sea in 1925 had broken him. He had told her no more than he had told the public, but had left a long manuscript of technical matters, as he said, written in English, evidently in order to safeguard her from the peril of casual pursuit. During a walk through a narrow lane near the Gothenburg dock, A bundle of papers falling from an attic window had knocked him down. 2 Lascar sailors at once helped him to his feet, but before the ambulance could reach him, he was dead. Physicians found no adequate cause for the end, and laid it to heart trouble and a weakened constitution. I now felt gnawing at my vitals that dark terror which will never leave me till I, too, am at rest, accidentally or otherwise. Persuading the widow that my connection with her husband's technical matters was sufficient to entitle me to his manuscript, I bore the document away and begun to read it on the London boat. It was a simple, rambling thing, a naive sailor's effort to a post facto diary, and strove to recall day by day the last awful voyage. I cannot attempt to transcribe it verbatim in all its cloudiness and redundance, but I will tell its gist enough to show why the sound of the water against the vessel's sides became so unendurable to me that I stopped my ears with cotton. Johansen, thank God, did not know quite all, even though he saw the city and the thing, but I shall never sleep calmly again when I think of the horrors that lurk ceaselessly behind life and time and space, and of those unhallowed blasphemies from elder stars which dream beneath the sea, known and favored by a nightmare cult ready and eager to lose them on the world whenever another earthquake shall heave at their monstrous stone city again to the sun and air.
Johansen's voyage had begun just as he told it to the Vice Admiralty. The Emma, in ballast, had cleared Auckland on February 20th, and had felt the full force of the earthquake-born tempest which must have heaved up from the sea bottom the horrors that filled men's dreams. Once more under control, the ship was making good progress when held up by the Alert on March 22nd, and I could feel the mate's regret as he wrote of her bombardment and sinking. Of the swarthy cult fiends on the Alert he speaks with significant horror. There was some peculiarly abominable quality about them which made their destruction seem almost a duty, and Johansen shews ingenuous wonder at the charge of ruthlessness brought against his party during the proceedings of the Court of Inquiry. Then, driven ahead by curiosity in their captured yacht under Johansen's command, the men sight a great stone pillar sticking out of the sea, and in south latitude 49 degrees 9, west longitude 126 degrees 43, came upon a coastline of mingled mud, ooze, and weedy cyclopean masonry, which can be nothing less than the tangible substance of Earth's supreme terror, the nightmare corpse city of Relia, that was built in measureless aeons behind history by the vast, loathsome shapes that seeped down from the dark stars. There lay great Cthulhu and his hordes, hidden in green slimy vaults, and sending out at last, after cycles incalculable, the thoughts that spread fear to the dreams of the sensitive and called imperiously to the faithful to come on a pilgrimage of liberation and restoration. All this Johansen did not suspect, but God knows, he soon saw enough. I suppose that only a single mountain top, the hideous monolith crowned citadel whereon great Cthulhu was buried, actually emerged from the waters. When I think of the extent of all that may be brooding down there, I almost wish to kill myself forthwith. Johansen and his men were awed by the cosmic majesty of this dripping Babylon of elder demons, and must have guessed without guidance that it was nothing of this or any sane planet. Awe at the unbelievable size of the greenish stone blocks, at the dizzying height of the great cavern monolith, and of the stupefying identity of the colossal statues and bas-reliefs with the queer image found in the shrine on the Alert, is poignantly visible in every line of the mate's frightened description. Without knowing what futurism is like, Johansen achieved something very close to it when he spoke of the city. For instead of describing any definite structure or building, he dwells only on broad impressions of vast angles and stone surfaces too great to belong to anything right or proper for this earth, and impious with horrible images and hieroglyphs. I mention his talk about angles because it suggests something Wilcox had told me of his awful dreams. He had said that the geometry of the dream place he saw was abnormal, non-Euclidean, and loathsomely redolent of spheres and dimensions apart from ours. Now an unlettered seaman felt the same thing whilst gazing at the terrible reality.
Johansen and his men landed at a sloping mud bank on this monstrous acropolis and clambered slipperily up over tight and oozy blocks, which could have been no mortal staircase. The very sun of heaven seemed distorted when viewed through the polarizing miasma welling out from the sea-soaked perversion, and twisted menace and suspense lurked leeringly in those crazily elusive angles of carven rock, where a second glance shewed concavity after the first shewed convexity. Something very like fright had come over all the explorers before anything more definite than rock and ooze and weed was seen. Each would have fled had he not feared the scorn of the others. It was only half-heartedly that they searched, vainly as it proved, for some portable souvenir to bear away. It was Rodriguez the Portuguese who climbed up the foot of the monolith and shouted of what he had found. The rest followed him and looked curiously at the immense carved door with the now familiar squid dragon bas-relief. It was, Johansen said, like a great barn door, and they all felt that it was a door because of the ornate lintel, threshold and jambs around it, but they could not decide whether it lay flat like a trapdoor or slantwise like an outside cellar door. As Wilcox would have said, the geometry of the place was all wrong. One could not be sure that the sea and the ground were horizontal, hence the relative position of everything else seemed phantasmally variable. Bryden pushed at the stone in several places without result. Then Donovan felt over delicately around the edge, pressing each point separately as he went. Climbed interminably along a grotesque stone moulding. That is, one would call it climbing if the thing was not, after all, horizontal. And the men wondered how any door in the universe could be so vast. Then, very softly and slowly, the acre grate panel began to give inward at the top, and they saw that it was balanced. Donovan slid on, or somehow propelled himself down, or along the jamb rejoined his fellows, and everyone watched the queer recession of the monstrosity carven portal. In the fantasy of prismatic distortion, it moved anonymously in a diagonal way, so that all the rules of matter and perspective seemed upset. The aperture was black with a darkness almost material. The tenebrous was indeed a positive quality, where it obscured such parts of the inner walls as ought to have been revealed, and actually burst forth like smoke from an aeon-long imprisonment, visible darkening the sun as it slunk away into the shrunken and gibbous sky on flapping membranous wings. The odour arising from the newly opened depths was intolerable, and at length the quick-eared Hawkins thought he had heard nasty, slopping sound down there. Everyone listened, and everyone was listening still, when it lumbered slobberingly in sight, and gropingly squeezed its gelatinous green immensity throughout the black doorway, into the tainted outside air of that poison city of madness.
Alright, Kenzie.
Poor Johansen's writing almost gave out when he wrote of this. Of the 6 men who never reached the ship, he thinks 2 perished of pure fright in the accursed instant. The thing cannot be described. There is no language for such abysms of shrieking and immemorial lunacy, such eldritch contradictions of all matter, force, and cosmic order. A mountain walked or stumbled. God, what wonder that across the great earth a great architect went mad, and poor Wilcox raved with fever in that telepathic instant. The thing of the idols, the green, sticky spawn of the stars, had awakened to claim his own. The stars were right again, and what an old age cult had failed to do by design, a band of innocent sailors had done by accident. After vigintillions of years, great Cthulhu was loose again, and ravening for delight. 3 men were swept up by the flabby claws before anybody turned. God rest them, if there be any rest in the universe. They were Donovan, Guerrera, and Engstrom. Parker slipped as the others three were plunging frenziedly over endless vistas and green crushed rock to the boat, and Johansen swears he was swallowed up by an angle of masonry which shouldn't have been there, an angle which was acute but behaved as if it were obtuse. So only Bryden and Johansen reached the boat, and pulled desperately for the alert as the mountainous monstrosity flopped down the slimy stones and hesitated, floundering at the edge of the water. Steam had not been suffered to go down entirely, despite the departure of all hands for the ashore, and it was the work of only a few moments of feverish rushing up and down between wheel and engines to get the alert underway. Slowly, amidst the distorted horrors of that indescribable scene, she begun to churn the lethal waters, whilst on the masonry of that carnal shore that was not on earth, the Titan thing from the stars slavered and gibbered like Polypheme cursing the fleeing ship of Odysseus. Then, bolder than the storied Cyclops, great Cthulhu slid greasily back into the water, and began to pursue with vast wave-rising strokes of cosmic potency. Braden looked back and went mad, laughing shrilly as he kept on laughing at intervals till death found him one night in the cabin whilst Johansen was wandering deliriously. But Johansen had not given out yet. Knowing that thing could surely overtake the alert until steam was fully up, he resolved on a desperate chance, and, setting the engine for full speed, ran lightning-like on deck and reversed the wheel. There was a mighty eddying and foaming in the noisome brine, and as the steam mounted higher and higher, the brave Norwegian drove his vessel head-on against the pursuing jelly, which rose above the unclean froth like the stern of a demon galleon. The awful squid head with writhing feelers came nearly up the bowsprit and the sturdy yacht, but Johansen drove on relentlessly. There was a bursting of an exploding bladder, a slushy nastiness as of a cloven sunfish, a stench of 1,000 opened graves, and a sound that the chronicler would not put on paper. For an instant the ship was befouled by an acrid and blinding green cloud, and then there was only a venomous seething astern, where, God in heaven, the scattered plasticity of that nameless sky spawn was nebulously recombining in its hateful original form, whilst its distance widened every second as the alert gained impetus from its mounting steam.
That was all. After that, Johansen only brooded over the idol in the cabin, and attended to a few matters of food for himself and the laughing maniac by his side. He did not try to navigate after the first bold flight, for the reaction had taken something out of his soul. Then came the storm of April 2nd, and a gathering of the clouds about his consciousness. There was a sense of spectral whirling through liquid gulfs of infinity, of dizzying rides through reeling universes on a comet's tail, and of hysterical plunges from the pit to the moon, and from the moon back again to the pit, all livened by a cachinnating chorus of the distorted, hilarious elder gods and the green, bat-winged mocking imps of Tartarus. Out of the dream came rescue, the Vigilant, the Vice-Admiralty Court, the streets of Dunedin, and the long voyage back home to the old house by the Edgeburg. He could not tell. They would think him mad. He would write of what he knew before death came, but his wife must not guess. Death would be a boon, if only it could blot out the memories. That was the document I read, and now I have placed it in the tin box beside the bas-relief in the papers of Professor Angell. With it shall go this record of mine, this test of my own sanity, wherein is pieced together that which I hope may never be pieced together again. I have looked upon all that the universe has to hold of horror, and even the skies of spring and the flowers of summer must ever afterward be poison to me. But I do not think my life will be long. As my uncle went, as poor Johansen went, so shall I go. I know too much, and the cult still lives. Cthulhu still lives too, I suppose, again in that chasm of stone which has shielded him since the sun was young. His accursed city is sunken once more, for the Vigilance sailed over the spot after the April storm. But his ministers on earth still bellow and prance and slay around idle capped monoliths in lonely places. He must have been trapped by the sinking, whilst within his black abyss, or else the world would by now be screaming with fright and frenzy. Who knows the end? What has risen may sink, and what has sunk may rise. Loathsomeness waits and dreams in the deep, and decay spreads over the tottering cities of man. A time will come, but I must not and cannot think. Let me pray that, if I do not survive this manuscript, my executors may put caution before audacity, and see that it meets no other eye. And that is the end.
We did it! Okay, so now I can finally say it. Lol, semen.
I get
Got
it.
you.
I get jokes.
Because it sounds like seminal fluid.
My he-who goblin brain is amused.
Alright, everyone in the chat, start talking again and tell us what you thought of the story if this is your first time hearing it.
Yeah.
It was my first
Yeah.
time actually reading it,
Oh, what did
and
you
I
think?
enjoyed it very much.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah,
And
it's a
me
very
and Cthulhu
visual.
liked it as well.
Yeah, it's a very visual tale.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah.
I did have a little giggle at that. Clap, bravo, clap. Thank you, Raptor.
I could tell that I could tell I was starting to get sleepy because I normally my starters I could keep it at bay, but pretty much any words that were beginning with L or C, I was just having such a hard time getting out.
I heard what you were talking about, but I don't think it's nearly as bad as you think it is.
I thought I was gonna
Yeah, I
lose an contact lens just by blinking. I had to leave him. I had to put on my glasses.
Yeah, I had to put my glasses on. I was just sort of going, why does this keep getting smaller?
Yeah. I enjoyed two very spooky and well written. Oh, I'm glad to hear that, Raptor. Yeah, to me, one of the most frightening things about it is, it says they assumed that this ritual was a part of this religion, but then, practitioners of that religion would tell them, no, we've never seen anything like this. And then everyone's just, confused and frightened of what it could be.
There's no, ominous, all-knowing old man who comes out being like, let me explain this shit to you.
Yeah. Almost got that with Castro, but then, I guess, Cuba rose up against him.
I get it, because that's Justin Trudeau's dad.
So, one thing I was not expecting, obviously, I know this was the thing back then, I just didn't expect it to, show up prominently in his stories as it did, was the racial language.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this was one of his earlier stories.
Cult.
Cameron says, let me learn you a thing or two.
These fucking people. I was like, okay.
But yeah, that's the story of Cthulhu. That started it all. Started too much, I'd say, at some points. And some stories that just shouldn't have been made. But other ones that are almost as good.
Yeah, and he something, it's like, it shows up in movies, and it's just like, it's Cthulhu, we brought Cthulhu.
Yep.
It gave us a really funny arc in a South Park 3-parter.
Meow, 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 meow. Ooh. Although I will
Also,
say, that was great for him destroying everyone at the Justin Bieber concert.
Yes.
Oh, 100%.
I like the picture you chose for the background for this episode, but it also kind of reminds me of the ending for Jurassic World, And I hate that it does.
Yeah.
Because it just looks like a flare that he's holding before he's standing before a monstrosity.
Fuck Jurassic World.
Yeah, I don't remember in Jurassic Park either, Grant and Malcolm, like, waving the flares at Cthulhu. I thought that was a T-Rex. I could be wrong, though. Hey!
Honestly,
hey, over here! They just, like, drop dead from their minds being turned into pudding.
They could have just inserted Cthulhu at that point. It would have been, like... It couldn't have gotten more convoluted.
Yeah.
I must admit, I think this is probably maybe like the 4th or 5th time I've read this story all the way through. And I did forget the amount of times H.P. Lovecraft describes that something as being oozing.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever read a book or a story that's included the word oozing so much.
Or
You
flopping.
you never read a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic?
No, I didn't.
I don't even think
is
that uses oozing as much.
Well, that's the thing. It's like the
I'm just
secret
thinking
of
of the
the
sequel
ooze.
movie.
With the secret of the ooze is that it's just ooze, and like this time it's just like oozing. No, I'm gonna end up going into Lord of the Rings. Breaking burn. But yes, Call of Cthulhu. Tell your friends.
Yes. And next, we have a related tale. Related in a very, loose, tangential sense.
Yeah, so like...
Yeah, you didn't send us,
Oh, that's because I want it to be a surprise.
Oh boy.
Alright, Oh, before you go, Gemma, I wanted to ask, has either of you ever, heard of or played the Call of Cthulhu, tabletop role-playing game?
No, but I've heard of it.
I haven't. I've really only played the video game related to Call of Cthulhu, but it's not related to Call of Cthulhu, kind of. It's Call of Cthulhu Dark Corners of the Earth, and it's pretty much basically just Shadow over Innsmouth,
Gotcha.
but with Cthulhu in it. But I haven't played the role-playing game, no.
So, see, I've never actually played it, but I've read about it extensively. It is an infamous game for how often characters can die, and most people, when they find out they're going to be playing, will make 2 or 3 characters at the beginning just to have some backups so they can just keep the story going.
Oh, I see.
And you actually have a sanity score. And if you lose all your insanity, there are multiple things that can happen. You could either go insane, you could be possessed or turned into like some eldritch creature that's undyingly serves the old ones. And Gemma, I know you said you're going after this story, but you'll still be listening. Kind of disappointing because the protagonist of this on and off speaks with a nigh incomprehensible Scottish accent. So you'll get to hear my attempt at that.
Oh boy.
But
yeah, sorry, I would totally be staying, but I just know for a fact that I'm just going to become so incomprehensible that, well, I mean, that would work, but like for the fact that you've said that in the story.
It's
but
perfect. We'll just make the Scott. We'll make the Scott drunk.
Just like, hello, people, and what?
Oh, sorry to interrupt. I just had to read. Cameron has actually played a few sessions of Call of Cthulhu, so that's cool.
Cool.
That is cool.
But yeah, before you go, I will announce the name of the story. This, my friends, is the tale of Old Man Henderson.
Can you send it to me now?
Yes. Well, I was about to say, I'll end the call with you two now and start up a call with you and Raptor.
Okay.
So Gemma,
Cool.
thanks for joining us. It was great having you on again, and I hope you can join us again soon.
Yes, I won't be able to join next week because I'll be in Scotland, speaking incomprehensibly, of course.
Excellent.
But I should
And then
be
the world
around.
will be balanced as all things should be.
Yes, and I'll be back with Logan, just because I'll be picking him up next week.
Excellent.
Hooray! He can see himself immortalized as a mummy bear.
Oh, I sent him the pictures, and he just sent back a text with like, "Aww."
Aww.
Yeah. So he was quite happy. But yeah, you'll be able to see them in person next week.
What
But
did
yes,
Cove say, by the way?
Oh, Cobb went completely gaga for them.
Yay!
He was like, yeah. So I really appreciate them. Thank you. They're going to
I'm
be.
a wizard. I have successfully turned Cove to Jello.
Yes, you did.
Wait. Remember who you're talking to. You turned him to Jelly.
Fuck your Britishisms.
Yeah, we're not going to go into the macaroni and cheese early argument, I guess.
Oh god, we'll be here all night.
Because it's macaroni and cheese.
Or if you just want to do it American, it's just Mac, the letter N, and then cheese.
No. No, I don't think I will.
Embrace it. You lose less letters.
Yeah, but no.
Hello, apostrophe music. Does anyone remember that bad creepypasta episode with Spenderman? I think you mean Slenderman and Cthulhu.
No, he knew what he was doing.
Character gets split apart or something. Oh yeah, the mall stalker. Or
Yeah, that was Alexo's first video.
Yeah, the mall stalker and Late One Night, I think the other one was called. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was the one about the Cthulhu thing, but
yeah, and I think Matt was the one who was like, it just sounds like someone was writing down like a recollection of their latest game of Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah. It took me a minute because it literally took me a minute because, like, I know I've seen that episode and I'm like, all right, so
I split
I
from
can't
all
remember
the
any content from that though. Like, which would really go to show you just how bad those stories were. But then I'm like, oh yeah, it's like someone was just. It sounded like we should have known things about this story prior to reading it. And
yeah.
It's like,
yeah,
why are you making me do homework?
Yeah, Slenderman, Zozo, the Cthulhu cult. It's like, what? What are you talking about?
Although the fact that apostrophe music said Spenderman, I now want a video of someone singing "Hey Big Spender," and having a bunch of Slenderman pictures in the background.
Well, he does want $20.
He also does want to spend a little time with you.
God damn it.
Oh god,
I'm out.
It's 2010 all over again.
Alright, Cheb, I'll talk to you later.
Good night, Gemma.
Talk to you later. Night, guys. Bye.
Alright, and get the other call started here. Many important question, monk or warlock? I would say
I am back.
I would say monk, but I'm very biased toward it.
What?
Cameron's asking me a World of Warcraft question.
Ah.
Oh, and before I forget, hello, Raptor.
Hello.
Also, before we start, My pizza has arrived, so I will be right back.
Alright.
Yeah, pizza. Pizza.
Oh, and I'm going to say right now, I am going to claim reading the dialogue for Old Man Henderson.
Can I be the game master?
There is no game master, but alright, so I think we can get started without Kenzie really missing any. No, we can't. Oh, wait. I can put on the screen the artist's rendition of Old Man Henderson. Ain't he glorious?
It's not up on my screen yet.
Do the accent. Oh, Gemma, don't worry. I will do the accent. But while we're waiting, Raptor, how has your day been?
It's been pretty good. I just got a call from Stop Shop. I'm supposed to do an interview with them on Wednesday, and that's pretty exciting.
Excellent, congrats.
I hope I get the part.
So do I. Wait, you mean the job?
Yeah, the job. That's what I meant to say.
I was gonna say, wait, is this like a grocery store led play or something?
No. That is.
Although no,
Oh, I see him now. I see him now. he's glorious.
But I gotta say, I might have to come to your Stop and Shop and propose the idea that they hire you and then you all do a play based on a grocery store. The creepypasta with the Cthulhu thing was called Last Night. Okay, that's right. So Kenzie, Old Man Henderson is on the screen right now. What do you think?
Yeah, that is Old Man Henderson, all right.
Alright, alright, so this was on a message board back in 2006, I believe. And it starts off with, I hate derailing a thread on accident.
You mind sending it to us?
I did.
But he already did.
Where?
It's in the chat.
Here we go.
Bioman, we are now doing the tale of Old Man Henderson. Yes, this was posted on this message board by a user of the name Waffle House Millionaire. It starts off as, I hate derailing a thread on accident. Who wants to hear the tale of Old Man Henderson, the character who, quote-unquote, won Call of Cthulhu? That's the other thing. Call of Cthulhu is considered to be impossible to actually win. One person responded, I do, so he just went right to it. Alright then. I'd like to start by saying that the GM was a bastard that had it coming. Bullshit tactics make everyone go crazy like a D6 with only 5 sides. No story, no reason, lose 10 sanity. The others continue to allow this faggotry. We were playing a modern...
Can we say that?
Yes.
Are you sure?
It's okay, I give us permission.
Are you a homosexual?
No.
And you can't give permission.
You don't have the pass.
It's my channel, I get to. We were playing a modern day setting, with the others players being a college professor who found a couple of stray pages of a copy of the Necronomicon and wanted to find out just what the hell it was, a detective who was investigating a missing persons case connected to the local cult, and a local athlete, I think it was football, trying to find out why some of his friends seem so distant lately. And then...
Are we talking American football or the actual intended football?
American. And then there was Old Man Henderson, who was never given a first name. Old Man Henderson was already a little crazy, and blamed his life's misfortunes on Vietnam.
I mean,
Would one of you like to take the next 3?
I take it.
yeah, I'll do it.
Oh,
Do you want to go, Raptor?
I'll go after you.
Alright. He never went to Vietnam. He was 12 in 74. And I will be fucking amazed if anyone gets that reference. Not everyone does. It is the song Brother-in-Law by Tim Wilson, as far as I can tell. This is supposed to be scary, right?
No, this is
No.
Run Hot Beans.
I know, but like, don't we normally just read bad attempts at horror?
Yeah, but Old Man Henderson is loosely connected to Cthulhu, so...
Alright, fine. Well, no, I'm not clicking that link.
No.
Old Man Henderson wore combat boots, cargo shirts, and an open front Hawaiian shirt with a wife beater underneath. He was dyslexic and had a lesser case of schizophrenia, allowing him to assume that the reason he saw crazy shit was because he was a little bit crazy. He had a Grizzly Adams beard and wore his hair in a mohawk. He never took off his aviator shades for any reason. He had a stuffed parrot on his shoulder named Rupert, and he constantly asked for advice, while ignoring the other party members as convenient, assuming they were hallucinations. He had an automatic combat shotgun he knew how to use. He had also memorized the Anarchist Cookbook. He started the game with a pre-existing hatred of religion, cutlery, and books.
Okay, that was definitely more than 3, so Raptor, go ahead and take over.
Okay. His motivation was that he thought that the cult had stolen his lawn gnomes, while he actually donated them to a charity. The auction got high and forgot about it. Most importantly, he had a 320-page backstory that justified everything from his casual knowledge of physics to his ability to speak Portuguese flawlessly. It should have been 420 pages. Then it would have been perfect.
Yep.
You can just imagine the sort of shenanigans that character was involved in. To the point
Wait, is this a made-up character in someone's playing as in Call of Cthulhu?
Yeah. He was made to troll the asshole DM.
Okay.
point to having such a long backstory was threefold. 1. To ensure the GM would never actually read it, and 2. Since he would never read it except for in excerpts, I pointed out to justify things. No wait, sorry, I misread that. 2. Since he would never read it except for in excerpts, I pointed out to justify things. I could rewrite and change things around completely at random without anyone noticing, and most importantly, 3. Convince everyone that I was serious about this character, and that it wasn't simply the game wrecking bullshit that it was. Dickish, yes, but really, he did have it coming.
First outing of the group. The detective was spying on the building of the cultists with a camera. The jock was parked nearby, waiting for the group to let out so he could snoop it out. The professor had joined the cult to try and gain information. Old Man Henderson very calmly parked his car, got out holding the shotgun in clear view of anyone who happened to be looking, in this case the detective and the jock, strolled up to the front door, and kicked it in. While everyone just kind of stopped in shocked silence for a moment, he leveled his shotgun on the lead priest/cultist guy and yelled, "One moment, I need a drink." "Knuckle down, cunt! Any namblies be keeping me wee, man!" Did I mention that he had a nigh incomprehensible Scottish accent that came and went as he drank and or as amused me? The leader could understand my simple request to return my lawn gnomes. Literally, you think what I typed is hard to understand? Imagine it being slurred at you by a drunken Scotsman. He assumed I was trying to cast a spell at him in an elder tongue, and summed a Shoggoth by murdering one of his fellows. Go ahead, Kenzie.
One Molotov and about 20 rounds later, the Shoggoth is dead. And as is the cult leader, the professor, He made the mistake of trying to make Peacemaker mid-murderous rampage, and about 10 assorted cultists. Old Man Henderson then pissed on the Shoggoth's corpse, got back to his battered 92 Buick Sentry, and went home. The whole event was over in about 10 minutes game time, and nobody thought to get the Buick's plates. The building burned down shortly along with half the written plot, and every lead either of the surviving players had. The GM called a break to then to figure out how to fix and or work around what I just did. It only got crazier from there.
I must have more, good sir.
Typing out the full exploits of Old Man Henderson would take too long. Can I just give you the highlights reel?
I will settle for that.
Alrighty then. Some of his finer moments include dropping a yacht onto a penthouse suite owned by Cthulhu cultists, the stealing of said yacht from cultists of Hastur, thereby starting a cultist gang war, the tanker truck incident, and my personal favorite, Hell on Ice. Which one do you want to hear about first?
Dropping the yacht! Let's sink it from the top!
Alright, dropping the yacht. Old Man Henderson, with his erstwhile companion Jimmy the Jock, and his friends William Brocklaw, a once humble bartender, the now dead detectives player, Old Man Henderson burned down his bar on accident and blamed it on the cultists. One bluff check later, and he was in the posse. And Simon Breckenridge, British spy, the professor's player, now 6 characters in. And yes, they were more or less all killed by Old Man Henderson. Old Man Henderson had discovered that there was not one cult to the Elder Gods, but several. This complicated his search for his gnomes/crusade. He decided to enlist help in making the problem solve itself. Alright, go ahead, Raptor. Read your 3.
Using his context, Simon discovered that if an influential cultist of Hastur was coming to town to try and figure out how an avatar of his god was killed. More on this in the tanker truck incident. He also located the exact dock on which he would be landing in his boat. Jimmy, meanwhile, discovered the home of the head of the local Cthulhu cult was at a penthouse suite downtown. A plan was hatched. Old Man Henderson used all of his cunning to steal a military cargo helicopter
Shoryuken.
Okay, Shoryuken did the pilot and flew off. and hid it in an abandoned warehouse.
Go ahead, Kenzie. Yeah, go ahead, Kenzie, since I read the introduction.
Give me a minute, my mouth's full of cheese.
I always respect that.
Jimmy and Will set up a very expensive surround sound speaker system at the docks, while Simon made and planted a lot of smoke bombs. I like this plan already. That night, the yacht pulled in and we made our move. Right as Simon maneuvered the helicopter over the docks, we set off the smoke bombs and activated the speakers. On one side, a 50-piece marching band playing God Save the Queen at max volume, and on the other, the audio from the beach scene from Saving Private Ryan. Imagine, for a moment, what being on the dock would have been like. Utter fucking chaos. This might be my favorite story we've ever read.
Same.
I don't know what the fuck is going on, and I kind of love it. Alright, I'm going back to eating pizza, you read.
Right. I jumped down from the helicopter onto the boat, and rigged it to lift out of there. During the course of which I ran into the cultist guy and ninja kicked him in the head, knocking him tail over tea kettle and off the boat. I later learned that he broke his neck in the fall. Damn convenient, otherwise he might have been able to ID me. We then lifted the boat out of there, switched to our secondary audio on all sides. My Heart Will Go On by Celine Dion. I was in a vengeful mood, gnome-stealing bastards.
This is the best plan!
So when the cultists finally got the smoke to clear, their yacht was gone, their leader was dead, and Celine Dion was stuck in their heads. Not the best of days. Then we went across town in a stolen military cargo chopper carrying a 40-foot yacht and parked the helicopter above the penthouse with the yacht about 80 feet above it. Then we cut the line, jumped out with our parachutes, and watched the yacht ruin a dinner party while placing bets on whether the military would save the chopper, blow it up, or if it would just hover there until it ran out of fuel. Raptor, you go ahead and take the next three.
Okay, the tank truck incident. Now time for what will be forever be known as the tanker truck incident. Notice "the" is capitalized. This is because no matter what incidents in the future may involve tanker trucks, this is the definitive one. It started out innocently enough. Old man Henderson left the stakeout out in a van outside the evil coach's meeting place to go get some hooch. The only people left there were the detective and James Fink. The professor's second character. Jimmy was gone because it was a school night. Old man Henderson was a bad influence, but damned if he didn't have the kid's best interests at heart. The coasters see me leaving. I had a very distinct appearance after all. Very useful in scoring TPKs and discovering that my friends were spying on them. The detective gets a pretty god death. What does God mean?
Yeah, go ahead and finish reading. I'll explain at the end.
Okay, and James dies like a bitch, but not yet.
Alright, yeah, for anyone unfamiliar with gaming speak, TPK stands for Total Party Kill. Hello, Kay. Glad you can join us. And
hey,
a guard death basically means you go out in like a very manly blaze of glory by sacrificing yourself for others.
I have pizza.
Do you want to read or should I take it then?
Wait a minute.
Okay, we are in the middle of the adventures of Old Man Henderson.
Okay. On my way back walking along, the detective and James have been brought inside as part of a ritual to give Hester an avatar in our world. He had been banished and the only way he could come here is via a loophole. He could only use as hosts people who knew he existed and had thwarted him thrice. And then he had to make them drink the lifeblood of their closest friend to make the binding permanent. In case you're wondering, permanent binding equals game over. The first part of the ritual was completed, but before Hester could take control, the detective broke James's shackles and he tried to run. He made it as far as the street when the detective, now Hester, caught up with him, part demon form. Pardon me. Now where this church, for lack of a better term, was located was at the end of the road on a T-shaped intersection. There was a gas station about 3 blocks away, which is where Old Man Henderson was while this was going on.
Old Man Henderson sees the shit hit the fan and steals a half-full tanker truck that was refilling the station's holding tank. While I bring the truck up to ramming speed, I toss a 12-pound block of C4 in the passenger seat and rig the detonator to the airbags. Old Man Henderson then took a bracing shot of whiskey, jammed a knife through the gas pedal, then jumped out of the truck onto his heelys. Yes, he modified his combat boots to have heelys. I swear to God I had not planned this to happen. The heelys just sounded like something fucking ridiculous and in character. And Kay says, that
So you can
like...
just decide this shit, like, mid-game?
Oh no, it was part of the, of his backstory that he had them, he just never expected to use them like that.
Oh.
And Kay says, that sounds like an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode. Yeah, I was trying to see if anyone had ever photoshopped, like, one of their titles over in front of the campfire to say The Tale of Old Man Henderson, but sadly, no one ever has.
Imagine an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode where one of the kids just tells the whole story of Old Man Henderson. They would have been so confused at what the men of society would have been so confused at what was happening right now.
It's like, okay, how do we get him committed?
A whole season would have to be dedicated to Old Man Henderson.
Alright, Raptor, your turn.
Okay. He watched the truck ram the detective into the church, then blow him up and all the cultists to Kingdom Come. The truck also killed James by running him over. That is a little bitchy way to die. That's when the back trail ignited. Fire going all the way back to the gas station and destroying it. Continuing my streak of accidentally destroying anything that might lead people back to Old Man Henderson. I took a moment to call Jimmy.
Henderson here! Figured out what the nasties are weak against!
What's that, Mr. Henderson?
The Heelys have made Kay very happy.
Yes! Point blank annihilation! Click. Alright, Kenzie, your turn.
Well, it starts off, aren't you Waffle House millionaire?
Oh yeah. Does anyone care if I throw up Hell on Ice? It's my favorite of the bunch, but if nobody
I'm responding
cares...
though.
Okay. But if nobody cares, I'll save it for later. Almost forgot to mention, there was a bar right next to the gas station called, The Humble Revelation, which was, the one that Will had owned.
Fucking do it, you crazy son of a
I was
bitch.
responding.
Oh, sorry.
You can be the next one.
Okay.
Fucking do it, you crazy son of a bitch!
For the love of God, more!
Okie doke. We were in the end game with zombies and shoggoths chasing us, and I managed to get Jimmy disappeared. So it was Old Man Henderson, Simon, and Will going for the final strong point we had in an abandoned hockey stadium. Sorry, hang on. On the way there, we had rammed through a small home and garden store in our truck. When we had arrived, we started barring the doors and windows when I noticed something. Our trip through the store had netted us a passenger, a single lawn gnome. Somehow, I knew right then and there this was it. No lucky turn of fate, no deus ex machina. Old Man Henderson was going to die.
Oh,
But I'd be damned if it wouldn't be
Henderson.
the best fucking last stand ever.
Hang on.
Oh wait, I just want to read this one paragraph and then I'll give it over to you guys.
Okay.
I then revealed to the GM that Henderson was a world champion figure skater, hockey player, and golfer.
The backstory of Doom got one final use. We had got almost all of the doors barricaded, but the zombies and Shoggoth army had kicked in the last door and got Simon. Will was pulled off the Zamboni after he managed to throw the crate onto the ice. The crate full of exploding hockey pucks.
Yay!
I lasted a couple of minutes while blasting Bust a Move by Young MC before the
Fuck yeah.
situation resolved into totally fucked. I switched to the next track as I yelled, Haster! 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 The next track came on. It was the Canadian National Anthem, which Old Man Henderson began to sing proudly at the top of his lungs. I then threw out the 3 pieces of knowledge that marked Old Man Henderson's blaze of glory. Raptor?
Hey, 1. Colin has this name 3 times will summon him, but only if the one who is truest foe at the time calls it. Guess who? 2. When an elder god is summoned from beyond, they suffer for some sort of summoning sickness. They're still unbelievably strong, but can't be killed forever if you hit them hard enough. 3. The building had enough explosives wired to make Michael Bay blush.
Fuck yes!
Yes. And that, my friends, is the tale of how Old Man Henderson won Call of Cthulhu.
Alright, yeah, and I know it says here that there's more posted, but I've never actually been able to find the continued story.
Aww.
It's lost media.
Yeah.
What a shame.
But yeah, so that is the tale of the one player and his character who managed to win Call of Cthulhu.
Admittedly, it's not a bad ending, because at least Old Man Henderson went out as a Chad.
Yeah. A world-class figure skater, hockey player, and golfer.
I'm so glad I got to read that.
I love he got the others killed just because he decided to leave their stakeout, walk out into plain sight to go find some hooch.
Yep.
And then, yeah, we had nabbed a lone passenger, a lawn gnome. Just one of those things that the GM says where you're like, yeah, this is it. Old Man Henderson lost episode. See, I might write such a story where it's like, like whatever creature comes from this lost episode tries to like haunt and terrorize Old Man Henderson, but just ends up getting its ass kicked by him because he's like, no, you can't do this. I'm Old Man fucking Henderson.
Do it. Please.
I will.
I am glad we ended up reading this.
As a sometimes DM, this hurts my soul. As a player, though, I've heard the call of Cthulhu. It was my dad calling me in for dinner. But I take it that you guys all enjoyed the tale of Old Man Henderson.
Yeah, that was really good.
Small
Very funny.
Cthulhu was pleased.
Good. But yes, so now, when someone righteously trolls a GM, it's usually called Henderson Brew Coffee. Although it does tend to get tossed around a lot by people like, oh, I did some trolling. Like, it was mild trolling, it wasn't, vengeful and righteous at all, but they're like, oh yeah, I did some real Henderson brand coffee. It's like, no, you didn't. This is bare minimum trolling at best. They all just want their 5 minutes of glory being compared to Henderson.
No one can beat Henderson.
Yes. No one can match this level of trolling, even if they tried.
I just saw a fucking 320-page backstory.
Wasted opportunity. I'm sure you could have padded more bullshit to get it to 420.
Yes.
You know what? No. That would have been too on the nose. It's perfect as is.
Oh, that and 6 characters, most of them killed by Henderson.
Yes.
I heard nothing but Old Man on Heelys. Who gives a fuck what else there was? Yeah, the fact that he dove from a soon-to-be exploding tanker truck. Just landed perfectly to skate away on Heelys.
And also remember, he is wearing combat boots. He had to get those Heelys custom.
Yes. Hester could have beat Henderson. An elder god fell before his chaotic might. Yeah, jeez. Old Man Henderson versus Rocket Fist Rick, Dawn of Justice. No, they don't fight. Henderson is one of Rick's descendants. It's just the Rick
Didn't it be the
blood.
other way around, since he's very old?
Well, no, because
Rick,
it said he was born in 62, so.
Well, when was Rocket Fist Rick born?
Rocket Fist Rick is literally the first man ever created. Sort of
Fine.
Adam.
Old Man Henderson is like Rocket Fist Rick's distant cousin.
Yeah. It's just like, for all the descendants that Rick has, the Rick blood is particularly thick and powerful in Henderson's veins. But, yeah, it's like, you got the Virgin Onision, going into the school shooting on Heelys versus the Chad Henderson jumping from an exploding tanker truck after drinking whiskey on combat boot Heelys.
I actually have like an Onision book. He stood up school wearing Heelys.
No, they heard that the school was being shot up while on the bus ride there. So the bus driver started to turn around, so Greg, whatever the character's name, Greg jumps out of the bus and skates on his Heelys to the school to save Abigail.
It's just as bad as I could imagine it.
And we're all worse off for it.
Yes. The blood of Gilgamesh goes through Henderson's veins, yes. As someone who knows Rocket Fist Rick Lore Jacob stated that ever since Injustice existed, Rick existed to bring balance. Yes, correct. Yeah, Rick. Yeah, he existed to fight injustice, namely the injustice caused by Absathoth. Which I would say, of the people who attempt to spell her name, only about 10% get it right.
How is it spelled?
ABBSITHOTH.
Cool.
But I'm gonna call it there. No one can use Helios except the Soul Man. No one, it's illegal. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you all for tuning in. We will be back next Wednesday with another episode of Hot and Cold Beans. And then Thursday, Raptor and I, and possibly Kenzie, will be joining with Rudy to read Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
So, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And we will see you guys next time. Same bean time, same bean channel.
That was a lot of fun.
Yep.